At least 2 people have been killed and more than 1,000 have been injured in Turkey, all amid protests and fierce clashes with police that have now continued, well, for several days to date. Almost 1,000 have been arrested so far. Now, what started as a peaceful sit-in against plans to revamp a park in central Istanbul has spiraled into a nationwide display of anger against the government. Let's cross live now to RT's Irina Galushko standing by in Istanbul. Good to see you, Irina. Can you bring us up to speed of the latest hours? What have you seen there in Istanbul?
Well, I have to say that the protests have been raging throughout the night. And as a matter of fact, my hotel faces the Taksim Square, and I woke up at around 2:30 a.m. because of the extreme noise and the smell of something burning coming in from the street. And it was really a sight to behold. In the middle of the darkest night, you saw those red flashes of fires burning in the middle of the square. Now, the protesters have been burning a lot of things around the square, starting from kiosks and vendors' booths and ending mostly with vehicles. Now, among those vehicles were police, some of the police trucks that I have personally seen, but also they seem to have been targeting the satellite vehicles, the SNG trucks of the local media companies. You have to understand that in Turkey, a lot of people are incredibly distrustful of the media, especially of the state-controlled media. And as a matter of fact, that is largely the reason why I'm actually sitting in the studio today and not out on the square, because the companies that were doing live transmissions from the Taksim Square yesterday, today said it's too dangerous to go out there, because it did seem by the end of the day that the people's negative feelings towards the media were starting to sort of transpire into the negative feelings towards all sorts of media, all media representatives. Now, to go back a little bit, the police did withdraw from Taksim Square in the early afternoon on Saturday, and that is when tens of thousands of people started pouring into the square, despite the fact that it was essentially permeated with tear gas and pepper spray, and but there's still puddles of water everywhere from water cannons being used. Tens of thousands flocked to the square, and at one point it did seem like it was like I was not in Istanbul, but rather in Tahrir Square in Egypt or in Tunisia during the protests. And you have to understand that the protests began because of the government plans to get rid of a park in the middle of the city. It was a peaceful sit-in until the police started to break it up using tear gas and essentially excessive force, and that is when people have gathered over there in multitudes, and they were at that point protesting not the plans to demolish the park, but rather they were saying they wanted to save the country from Erdogan and his policies, which are becoming increasingly unpopular with the people in Turkey. Most of the people that I've spoken to said you can say there's 3 things that they're unhappy about. It's Erdogan's policies towards Syria, it's the increasing Islamization of the country, and basically a crackdown on all freedoms, particularly in areas concerning media and journalists. Turkey remains the #1 country when it comes to the number of journalists jailed. So all of these grievances came together in people's minds, and people poured out on the streets to protest, and of course they were dispersed by police. That went on until literally early hours of morning on Sunday, and it doesn't seem like really it's going to die down anytime soon.
Irina, what about the Turkish Prime Minister? How has he reacted to the unrest, also for the calls demanding he steps down? And perhaps you're going to bring us up to speed about the international community. Any reactions from around the world so far?
Well, yes, actually. The one thing you can say about Erdogan is that he said that he did admit on Saturday, briefly, that perhaps there was an excessive use of force. But then he said the plans to demolish the park and to build a shopping center instead will proceed as planned. Now, let's stop with when it comes to international reaction. We should mention the report by Amnesty International, which office happens to be really close to Taksim Square. And they have said, and I'm quoting, that this was a disgraceful use of excessive force demonstrated by police in Istanbul. They went on to talk about how they were trying to help out protesters who have been injured in the protests or have been suffering from the effects of pepper spray or tear gas, and they were actually being obstructed in doing so by the police. Having said that, the police did seem to be targeting individual protesters. There are some reports that some people may have lost their sight because of the tear gas being fired at a close range. There's also reports of police targeting individual shops and stores and cafes which were trying to help out the protesters on the square, and the police were seen to be throwing the tear gas canisters inside, and that is just incredibly damaging and of course rather brutal. And there were also reports that a medical association has tried to set up sort of street camps so they could help those who were injured in the protest, but they couldn't do so because of the tear gas permeating the streets. I could smell the tear gas coming into my hotel 2 kilometers away. The streets were blocked off. I had to walk around in that area. It was really difficult to breathe. In fact, the first thing that a lot of tourists were handed out when they came to Istanbul were little masks to cover their faces. And really, I saw a lot of people with their eyes, it did seem like their eyes were burning and they were suffering from the effects of tear gas. So we can talk about the excessive use of force, and still waiting for any reaction from Erdogan as to how exactly he's going to react to calls by Amnesty International to stop the police brutality.
All right, RT correspondent Irina Galushko there live in Istanbul. Thank you.